Welcome everyone to lead here after a week off, and I had difficulty unmuting there for a moment, so thank you, Laura, for doing so. A lot has changed since the last time we have a lot to share with you today and update you on. We continue to be impressed with how you process and, more importantly, respond to change. Things continue to change, sometimes day by day, sometimes things take a little bit longer. We want to keep you up to date and knowledgeable of the events that are occurring both this week and looking into next week as well. So Laura, if you could go through to the agenda, please. Or Susie. Thank you. So we're going to summarize what took place this week in the workshop, update you on the work of the task force, and revisiting fall seasons and how things are working. The meeting that will take place Monday at 9 a.m. Again, our continued progression of how we make decisions and communicate with you to provide you the most efficient and effective information to the best of our ability. What we've learned on the information you've provided on data collection from our COVID form, where we're at financially, and again, what post seasons, where we're at with that, which has also been the work of return participation and our staff. So with that being said, Eric, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Sounds good. I appreciate that, Bob. And as we talk about board workshop, I think that it's important to recognize the outset and how the board workshop was identified to happen and when that took place. So the board workshop was scheduled better than a month ago in anticipation that setting the final direction on what seasons would be going forward, that we would need more time. As everyone on this call recognizes, making decisions quickly as we headed into the school year and into activities puts a lot of strain on things, and we continue to get lots of information on a regular basis, but wanted to be a couple of weeks ahead of our October 1 board meeting to be able to give our board a chance to ask questions, request more information, hear from folks about how things are going, and better inform them as we prepare for an October 1 board meeting. As we've been going through our start to the school year and have seen participation taking place across the state of Minnesota, we've seen really good things from our schools. And we've also received additional information and requests even from board members and schools specifically saying, is there a chance to revisit fall activities that have been postponed, and is that something that would be looked at or thought about? So that also became a part of what our board workshop was. In preparing for that, our board said as much information as you can share about what we know right now would be helpful. And so we brought back as much information as we could, but we also requested direct contact with the Department of Health. You know how important that is to your school plans. It's obviously just as important to all the plans that we put in place for our school programs, for activities and athletics. And so we were able to have 4 members of the Department of Health be with the board of directors for 45 minutes to talk about how they look at things. As we look at what some of that information was that they brought forward, they actually shared some data that they have been collecting beginning June 1 through September 5th. And that data still is in a formative stage, but they shared some screen shares that we do not have printouts of, but they talked about what's taking place in terms of infections within programs, within what they term as outbreaks, and an outbreak for them in a sports activity is anywhere from 2 to 9 individuals. I think that was might be their largest on any one team. And they looked at it by sport, and they try to break it down by age. And so there are those things happening, that there are teams that are being infected, and many of you have experienced that within your school setting as well, whether it be a student or a student who also happens to be an athlete and a participant, and so responding to that. But I think a couple of important takeaways from that Department of Health information is that they, number one, they look at things from a public health perspective. So they don't focus on a granular aspect of a particular student or a particular coach or official, but they look at a public health perspective and how do we best keep the public safe and as healthy as possible. So that's a lens that they use, and that's something they were very clear about in terms of the guidance that they provide. I think that as they talk through the things that are out there, the other thing that came forward is they don't deem something safe or not safe. What they identify is what are the risk factors that are involved, and then they offer it to whoever's asking the question of what's the level of risk that you are comfortable with. And those were some key takeaways and some very important points for our board to listen to and understand what those factors were. We asked questions around risk levels of activities and what are we seeing? Are those changing? We've talked about guidance from a national level on different National Federation of High Schools, USA Olympic sports, et cetera. All of these groups have worked with medical professionals to identify what do they see as most risky. And they continue to talk about prolonged contact around others is going to be the greatest risk. The closer you are, the more contact that you have, the longer that time frame is, and especially indoors are going to all increase what those risks are. And so that was information that the board had. We talked about information that I've received from other states about what's going on with the activities they're doing and how those are happening. The interruptions that they're having, schools that are having to step away from competition or practice for a while. There's not hard data on that. They're doing the same kinds of things we are and getting voluntary submission from their schools. So there's not a body out there that is collecting all of the extra data or specific data as far as how things are operating. So we continue to look though at what their experience is, just like we're looking at our own experiences and how those activities are going on. In general, what we're seeing is that spread is not necessarily being increased through competition. But what we see is that gathering makes a difference. The more teams that are gathering, the more that they are doing things together in school or outside of school, all are going to impact that. Our board continues to ask the questions, what's changed? And they continue to look to others to say, what else is part of this? And what else do we need to know? So we took a look at, as many different factors and allowed them to ask questions. There was some energy there from individuals on the board saying, I think we should have a formal review of where we are in terms of seasons. So it's more than just fall football and fall volleyball. We've got action to take in regards to adapted soccer. We need to make sure that that is vetted and that that is approved by the board of directors. But we also know that a decision around football and volleyball are decisions around all the other activities that are out there. We're not just a football or a volleyball entity, obviously, with other sports going on. And so we have to fit everything together where lots of other groups do 1 or 2 or maybe 3 sports. We do them all. And they've all got to fit together. And so that's a big part of where we're at. We really lean into and rely on a return to participation, and we also rely on our schools. And so the board said, can we get some feedback from schools? Not a vote, but what are the factors? Where are you leaning right now? And what are the reasons that you're leaning in that direction? So your school's not voting. They're sharing a philosophy and or a thought and providing input to us as to where you see things now for your particular school community and those factors. And they're asking our return to participation task force to come back with more specific information. And Bob's going to give you a little bit of that right now as far as what they've been working on.
Yeah, great, Eric. Thank you. So our return to participation is 7 hours in on the planning of calendars, right? They did so for the fall approved seasons, the training seasons. We plan long-term, knowing that short-term we're having to make adjustments, right? So I think one of the things that we continue to look at as we plan for calendar seasons, we follow our guiding principles, and our guiding principles make sure that we're in alignment with state agencies, doing what's best and what's safest for our student athletes. We continue to ask, when is the best time to offer and play the sports that we have, along with the activities that we offer? That came up through return to participation, hence the question around volleyball and football. To give you a little more detail too, as Eric talked about the survey, in providing feedback from our member schools to us. We continue to look at if there were a season, let's say for volleyball, and where that might fit. We're looking at a 10-week season that could exist from, let's say October 12th to December 18th as a framework in which volleyball would work best with the competing schedules that are out there. It's a student athlete opportunity. We want to make sure that there aren't pressures that exist out there already. Yet football continues to look at when might we start during the fall, and I think we need to be prepared to begin as quickly as possible, depending on the outcome from Monday's meeting. We have a plan in place. If it continues to be in the spring, that plan is in place. If we were to begin on September 21st or 22nd for football, if that were determined by the board, we're looking at a 10-week season. Going through Saturday, November 28th is traditionally when we would end, and I would say that would be the time frame. That can be a balance of regular season along with postseason, right? Not knowing what that postseason looks like right now would be where we started the fall season as well. We said, here's what the season looks like for the regular season. and a 2-week period of time for a postseason. That would be undetermined, but that would be something we would continue to work towards with at the discretion of the board. I would go back to as well what Eric said around MDH, and there's an article today from NPR. We continue to believe that our student athletes and our student participants' best option is to play with you in your schools, under our coaches, with our coaches and schools screening their health and continuing to update and monitor where they're at. We offer the best controlled environments no matter when that season occurs. We appreciate your work in doing so, and the Return to Participation Task Force knows that depending on the outcome, we need to be nimble and flexible again on what those remaining seasons look like. We continue to hear, let's minimize overlap between seasons, no greater than what maybe we've had in the past. We continue to hear that let's have our spring season finished prior to the July 4th holiday. We continue to hear that spring offers benefits towards the fall, while fall offers benefits over the spring. Weather is a big factor we can't predict. COVID is a big factor we can't predict, but what gives us the best opportunity to play every sport at the right time? So Jill Johnson, as our chair, has continued to do a wonderful job, as our eligibility committee members who serve on the Return to Participation Task Force, along with liaisons, Chuck Everett and Scott Larson as region secretaries are on that committee as well now, along with MNI AAA representation as well. So Eric, at this time, anything else from this slide that we should touch on or that we missed?
I think I just want to mention that within the board workshop, there's leaning into the special meeting, and I can talk about that just briefly. There was also some conversation, and there's been communication back from member schools, specifically at the district level, speaking about finance. And as you know, we've been talking about the fact that finance this year is going to be a huge challenge when 75% of our revenue is no longer something that we're going to see within the high school league, based on the rules that exist around COVID and what we can do with group gatherings. And so recognize that. One of the primary concerns is that there might be a disproportionate amount that's been assigned to small schools, and that's something that the board should think about. Would not expect that there'd be any action on that in the special board meeting. There could be some discussion on that about next steps as to how we address that. We do have another regularly scheduled board meeting coming October 1, and there have been no invoices sent or anything like that. So there is still time to discuss that and consider that should that be desired. And so we continue to lean into that in that special board meeting. Really the focus is going to be on fall sports in terms of decisions, because those are setting decisions that impact the remainder of the school year. Your input, again, is advisory in nature. I am talking constantly with MDE and MDH. I'll be talking with them again later this afternoon. We need to make sure that our plans are in alignment, and or if they're going to be challenged in any way, we would want to at least recognize that and know that ahead of time if there could be some things that are at play with that. So keep those things in mind as we go forward. And we'll also be talking a bit more about postseason with our board. And so with that, I think we can move on to the next slide.
Can I add a few and ask a few questions that I'm seeing in chat here? One
Please
is,
do.
Bob, can you go back and please review the dates that we're tentatively thinking about the board might discuss for both football and volleyball, and how quickly we think that turnaround could happen with football?
Yeah, again, I'm going to start with volleyball. So in both, we're looking at 10 weeks, right? So Return to Participation Task Force has looked at volleyball in those 10 weeks, and they believe that in October 12th to December 18th would be most desirable. Knowing those last 2 weeks, or the last 2 weeks would be a postseason opportunity in terms of volleyball. So again, trying to minimize that overlap with other seasons that may be occurring right now, and eliminating some conflicting opportunities for our student athletes. For football, again, at the discretion of the board, if we were to begin football on the 21st or 22nd, right? The 21st is the same day as our special board meeting. That can be very difficult, and not everybody is in a training season right now for football, so there are questions around that. If that were the case, though, on the 21st or 22nd, and let's say we did a 10-day acclimatization and we're able to play on October 2nd or 3rd, having a 10-week season with a mix of regular season and postseason options, and concluding on Thanksgiving weekend still would put us at November 28th. So those football dates of 10 weeks were November 1st or 22nd through November 28th. Volleyball being 10 weeks in the area of October 12th to December 18th. Does that help, Laura?
Yes, and also just appreciate the have people thought about type things that are being put in chats. Students who are out for one sport right now, students who are serving some eligibility things, please continue to add those into the chat. That is a great list for us to have to talk through and ask more information about, as well as to provide for our board. So the chat is very active here, and I do appreciate that. We may not get to everything, and they may not come back in FAQs simply because of the turnaround time, but it's a great list of think abouts for us.
Yeah,
Susie,
Laura, we
go
can
ahead, Bob.
have those conversations with liaisons as well. We're fully aware of multitude of what ifs that occur in those two scenarios, and we'll get the best information we can. So back to you, Laura, with our progression.
Great. Susie, if you would go to that slide that has the progression on it. So just, again, this is a slide that we continue to share and continue to update as we go on. This is our work list to provide guidance and information to schools. As of today, the next thing on our list is postseason for fall approved activities. That section information is set to go out before the end of this week. There may be a piece around that also around beyond section that will come after that. Tentative calendar for remaining activities will be finalized at the board meeting. However, we'll probably have a better idea of what that looks like after the special board meeting and where volleyball and football end up being placed. Open gym and captain's practices are still on there, and then moving on to winter and summer waiver. Bob, do you want to address, please, the open gym and captain practices and where that decision is at right now?
Yeah, absolutely. And we met with AD's advisory this past week and discussed as well. So I made a mistake on the FAQs. The recommendation from the eligibility committee was answered as in the FAQs as they voted against 5-0 in terms of captain's practices. It was a 5-0 vote in terms of open gyms, yet no action has been taken at this time. We brought that before AD's advisory again this week. AD's advisory overwhelmingly said, we give that back to the Minnesota State High School to make that decision, yes or no. Please do not allow that to be a local controlled decision. While some have said no to both captain's practices and open gyms, they would still like that, that action to be taken by the Minnesota State High School League to say, either we're having them or we're haven't, or we are not. So please know that that action has not been taken. We have not decided that, but if someone were to ask me right now, our priority is our seasons, our regular seasons. And my recommendation would be, let's minimize exposure. Let's minimize the opportunity for spread and not have those when at all possible. It continues to be very divided on what are our kids going to do and what controlled environment are they in if we don't offer those opportunities. So again, look for us to make a decision on both open gyms and or captain's practice, either as a staff or Eric, maybe even as an executive committee. Laura, anything else on that?
Thank you. So moving ahead, just want to show you and tell you about a few things. On your AD dashboard, two of the pieces on here, one is lead network information. This contains the lead information going forward. So from that link on your AD dashboard, it still links out to the lead microsite. We intend to start bringing those resources back onto our new website, but you can still find those there. And here's where you'll start to find information about upcoming as well as past lead meetings. So the email that Susie sent at about noon Tuesday this week shared this page with you and had you register for the Zoom here. That just seems to save a lot of steps for you and us to give you that registration right there. Registration works through the end of the meeting. So even if you're coming in at 10:44 to register, know that registration still works at that point. Our goal will be to continue to update these, and we will continue to let you know when the information is there, but you can always come right to this page off your AD dashboard to do there. The second piece on your AD dashboard is the COVID data form, and this is also over on that right-hand side. On this page is the explanation of the data that we're collecting and reasons for doing that. And then you can also find the results of past data pieces, and this is where you'll also find a link to complete the new data. This link will be posted late today, asking you to complete new data for the past 2 weeks tomorrow. So we'll be looking for the past 2 weeks on that form. This is not live right now, being worked on to be developed and deployed later today. Just want to take a quick look with you at the data that we collected on September 4th. And again, this has been very helpful. Our board saw this. Other people have been sharing this as we went along. It is a small handout, and hopefully you know how to use the enlarge feature in your PDF reader so that you can actually get to it. I'm just walking you through this because we expect that the format will be very similar each time. We had 348 schools voluntarily submit data, so very appreciative of that. A quick rundown of what model each of those schools are in. The next box starts to talk just a little bit about the effects that COVID has had on programs. The total number of programs from those 348 schools was 1,248. So a single school may have 1 or up to 6 programs. Of those 1,248 programs, 199 of them, or 16%, had some effect of COVID on their team. And by your data reports, effect meant that either students tested positive, they were in close contact and that limited their participation, practice may have been canceled, or a team might have been missing a game. So 199 had some type of an event within there. Another interesting piece is just to see how that plays out among different schools. So of those 348 schools, 235 of them had no incidents reported. So 68% of those reporting schools had no effect of COVID reported within their participation. On the other side of that, 0 schools saw it in all 6 of their programs. In the middle, and again, just thinking about how this reads, 11 of the schools, the 348, 3 of their teams were affected. So just kind of giving you an idea of what that looks like across a school. And then this section gives you a look of what that looks like across programs. So our boys cross country programs, we have 285 of them. 31 or 11% of those boys cross country programs had some COVID effect on an event within them. Girls cross country, 8%. And then just scrolling across boys soccer, we have 185 programs that reported. 22% of those teams had some type of a COVID incident. Girls soccer, 177 at 23%. Moving into our indoor program, girls swim and dive, 141 teams and 20% of those programs. And girls tennis, 176 teams and 20% of those. So just very helpful data to tell a story and paint a picture of where our activities are at in their effects of COVID on them. Absolutely not scientific data. We are not requiring, and our counts, many of you are estimating about what that is, but we do feel like it starts to paint a picture of what our programs look like right now. So you can expect that after you report data Friday and probably Monday for some of you to get that in, by mid next week, we'll share a sheet out like this again with you that provides information on the second set of 2 weeks. Also, just to note here, we do know that as we look back, this was submitted September 4th. That was just the very beginning of the school year for some of you. Some of you had been in school before that, but some of you still were not in school by September 4th. So looking forward to seeing that next round of data and how that looks for our schools. Bob, I will turn it back to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Laura, and great job to our staff to create some of these tools. And I think for our member schools, for your continued work to provide this type of feedback back to us, not only assists you, but assists us in how we move forward. Eric, I'm going to turn it back to you here to discuss the finances and where we're at.
Thanks, Bob. And Susie, if you want to put that up, would be fantastic. Appreciate that. Without question, and it's likely that we might have some superintendents on with us today, and if so, we welcome their participation. Certainly know that district offices are monitoring where things are in a lot of aspects, specifically around seasons, but also around finances. And our board took action on August 4th to implement a financial plan that would address the needs that we see at this time in operating forward in 2021. And everything is different. And I mentioned earlier that 75% of our revenue typically comes from our tournament tickets, our broadcasts, and our sponsorships. Those are all related back to tournament experiences. We know that the rules have changed and that when you cannot have large crowds, no one over 250 be part of an event, that completely changes what our picture looks like. It changes who's interested in the sponsorship world. It changes what we're able to do from locations and those kinds of things. And just so you know, we continue to advocate for our opportunities and what we can have. And so, Susie, if you would put that back up would be great. I can just touch base on a couple of things, but I think that the data is really important to know. Our typical year is about a $9 million budget. We are projecting a $5 million budget, which we believe we can balance if things go the way that we're seeing them. Remember, out of that $5 million, $800,000 right off the top goes towards insurance. So we're really doing an operational budget of about $4.2 million and trying to make that work. Like you in your schools, we are recreating everything that we've done in a completely new scenario on a day-by-day basis. I think it's important to remember that we're trying to do our very best to offer every experience in every activity that we can. And that takes time, and that takes work, and that takes communication, and we're trying to do it with you as we go forward. And so including things like working with task forces and with boards and with getting feedback and all of that, that just takes time. If we could all teach in our classroom in the same way we always have, it would take far less prep. But our teachers are working harder because they've got to be ready for multiple ways to do things, and that's the same thing that we're doing right now. Doing these kinds of meetings on a weekly or bi-weekly basis takes time, and it requires a lot to go on in putting that together. As we think forward and how we're addressing these things, we've made reductions, and our staff is not nearly as big as the public probably believes. 2 years ago, we had 23 and a half full-time staff. We had a retirement. We didn't replace it. It dropped to 22 and a half. Recently, you know, Craig Perry retired. That dropped us to 21 and a half. And in August, we cut 2 other staff positions. So we're now at 19 and a half. We're trying to do everything that we've done before and more with fewer, just like you're doing the same thing there. We're trying to provide the best information we can on a regular basis. We're trying to grow and advocate for opportunities for kids as we continue forward. We did put a plan in place. There have been a number of questions that are asked, and that's a board decision as to whether or not that changes as we go forward. Keep in mind that we all need to listen very carefully and understand that the perception of what state tournaments have meant in the past needs to be rethought. We've heard a lot of feedback from especially families saying, my kid has worked really hard and wants that state tournament experience, and their team could be really good, and they want to play at US Bank, or they want to be able to run in that state cross-country meet, or whatever that case might be. But it's going to look different, and it's going to look very different this year at whatever postseason is going to be. And that has a huge impact from a financial standpoint. We have cut staff, we've cut programming, we've cut costs. We did get a PPP loan. That allowed us to meet the requirements of that and keep people employed through May and June when you were asking all kinds of questions about how are we going to do summer and what's the fall going to look like. We continue to focus on a year-long approach at the same time as you. We're not planning, just as you're not planning graduation and prom right now, because that's not first and foremost, but it's on your list. We've got the same thing when it comes to winter and spring and all of that, and we're putting together the frameworks and all that goes into it. So working really, really hard to make that happen. understand that no one pays a lot of attention to the financial world until it has an impact on you. And we recognize that and have worked hard to reduce that impact as much as we could. Know that our limitations in terms of any kind of carryover max out at 50% of our budget, and we have not been near that for 4 years. We're actually at the low end, which is required by board to be at least 20%. So out of our $9 million, we're actually closer to between 1.5, and lots of those are reserve dollars that need to be held there because of certain things like post-employee benefits, the same kinds of things that you work on. And I know that I'm going a little bit too far, but there's been as much work as we can to try to make the State High School League continue to provide the services that it has, at the same time as making sure that we try and be as fiscally prudent as we can as we go forward. So just really important, and we'll continue to work with our finance committee, with the board, and with task forces if we need to try and make the adjustments that are important with that.
Eric, great job summarizing finances. And if you would just, Eric, before we leave finances, what I hear you saying is that during COVID times, this is a short-term opportunity to keep us where we're at and to continue to provide opportunities and resources and service to our member schools. We may hear some things or find out some things that work really well in this formula. We may also find some things that go back to what we used to know, or more similar to what we used to know. But I think what I hear is when we do well, the schools will do well as well financially. Can you touch on how long you might see a model like this to stay in place?
That's a great question, and it's the question we all ask. What's going to be our reality as we go forward? And I think if we look back 6 months, people might have thought we would be in a different place right now than we are. Others had a more long-term view. I think it's going to take some time for us to build that back. Should things go well, should we be able to open things up more? Should we be able to have greater crowds and do more with our activities? That will assist us as we go forward to be able to put some money back in the bank so that there's not the continual adjustments that might be necessary. And we do have plans to return money to school as we've done for many, many years up until the last 3 years. And that's the goal, is to give those dollars back and either have them operate as refunds or credits. And again, to try and take some of the variability or the volatility out of what happens from a financial picture. So I wish I could give you an end date, but when we're able to get back to having tournaments as we have in the past, crowd sizes as we've had in the past, and still provide those safe experiences, that's going to be better for all of us. In the meantime, like you, we're doing the very best we can to give those best possible experiences and continue to provide the leadership and the support that's part of our organization. So,
Eric, let's transition. You touched on postseason and potential for what end of season tournaments and or experiences look like. The task forces continue to work on postseason, and so has the staff. The staff has made recommendations. Can you update us on where we're at with postseason for our current fall approved activities?
Absolutely. So as we look into the postseason, and we've got sports going on right now, and people are asking questions, and they're right to be doing so. Our 2 weeks that have been assigned by the board in terms of the length of the season for postseason is focused on a regional competition approach. And in our world and in our state, we've relied on our sections to manage those experiences. Call them tournaments, call them postseason, whatever you want. We're going to rely on them again to manage those kinds of experiences. We're going to try to make sure that if at all possible, we can move beyond that. And that would take additional time. Likely our goal there would be that anything else would happen within 1 week. And we know that every sport is different, and we're going to try to provide consistency and look to provide an experience that's going to be some kind of a state level experience, but it won't look similar to what we've had in the past as we continue forward. And when it's team versus team, in this case, team tennis and soccer, they will look very, very similar. When it's individual building into team, as in cross country and in swimming, that they're going to look somewhat similar. And again, there's going to be restrictions as to what we can do, because we can't bring students from all of our Class A schools to the U of M Aquatic Center. From a limitation standpoint and the number of schools and communities that would be coming together, that just simply is not feasible and is outside the guidance that we've received from MDH and MDE and all of the others in terms of what's safe in this time frame. So we need to think differently about that as we work through. But we believe that we can have an equitable experience for our students through our sections and likely beyond that. And so again, that plan will be laid out with our region secretaries tomorrow afternoon is the goal, and then out to schools by the end of the day to make sure they know what those section levels are. And then if there is advancement beyond that, what we would be looking for that to come forward through the beginning part of next week and wrapping up that planning there and then putting all the details together. So patience for about 36 hours and you'll see more about what's happening from the section level, and probably 3 or 4 days and before we get to what a state level experience could look like for each one of our activities that are going on right now.
Great, Eric. Laura, anything that we need to, we've gone over our half-an-hour mark, and I figured we may today. Anything within chat before a few closing comments that we should address right now?
Lots of great questions. I'm responding to some, seeing some about finances. I believe, and Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, that the letter that went to superintendents has not been shared directly with ADs, and they would like that. We could absolutely make that available to them.
We can absolutely do that. I'm not familiar. I know that we needed to make sure it went to superintendents and heads of school to make sure that it landed in the business office as well. That's important, and that might have meant that somebody gave you a quick ring or walked down to your office or your area to talk with you. So we can absolutely share that. We have a complete packet as an attachment, which we could send out by email.
Yep.
Great. Laura, just a few closing comments, and if there's anything else, stop me too. So when we think about the survey and continuing to ask feedback from our member schools, back sometime probably in April or May, we encourage you to assemble or have that administrative team in place. Someone that's going to assist you in making decisions so you're not doing on your own. I hear from coaches that where is their voice and where is their feedback, and I hope that continues to be through you. Coaches need to work through our admin teams, through our activities administrators to make sure they're up to date and feel as though they do have a voice. What is next? We have a lot coming up here in our next couple of days as we get to Monday and into next week. We know what we know. We continue to work with the information that we currently have and plan out. Nothing is guaranteed during these times, right? We do not know what we do not know. We do not know what's going to happen with weather and or COVID and or county metrics that are in place. What we do know is you continue to do a great job, right? And the more opportunities that we provide and the more opportunities that you provide come with responsibility. If we're going to continue to play, if we're going to continue to offer opportunities, we need to continue to create those controlled environments. That's the work that you're doing. We need to continue to provide the tools to do so, to continue to provide opportunities for our student athletes and our schools around the state. I'm not sure what we're going to do next week with either liaisons or how we best communicate out with you. I do know that we will continue to do our best to provide you the effective and efficient information to assist you in doing your job. With that being said, if there isn't anything else, we'll conclude our lead meeting for today.